The data is already showing this, that they're moving to a buyer's market, right? So there's this really kind of esoteric stat that gets followed pretty closely by realtors and lenders. And it just simply means this. But I think keeping people focused on the idea of like, the goal is to get into the house. Like if you can afford the payment, you know, one of my favorite questions to ask is like, what's the interest rate on your car? Nobody knows. I have no clue. Like I do this for a living. I have no clue what the interest rate on my car is, but I know my payment is $769 a month. And so I think like focusing on the payment and the affordability and getting into the house, because I mean, you could drive yourself bonkers trying to find the best rate. And if one lender had all the best rates for all the scenarios, I would work there. And there would only be one mortgage company in the country. So it's really just finding somebody you trust and work with them. And because of the industry that I work on and what loan officers have screwed up is we've really just taught the consumer to only ask one question, which is what the rate is. And there's 5 or 6 things that are more important than that. So I'd say that's what the average consumer gets wrong.
Now, you mentioned old school marketing. I'm excited to dive into that a little bit because I'm wondering how old school are we really going to go with it? But before we do, you mentioned the 2007, 2008, everyone went broke. And I think a lot of people have that on their minds now. Like you mentioned, everything's expensive, home price, insurance price, et cetera. I mean, are we looking at going broke again here in the next couple of years? What do you think?
Well, I think 100%, like the data is already showing this, that they're moving to a buyer's market, right? So there's this really kind of esoteric stat that gets followed pretty closely by realtors and lenders. And it just simply means this. If another house did not go on the market in your neighborhood, how many months would it take for all the houses currently on the market to get sold off? Right. And in COVID, that supply of housing was like 2 to 4 weeks, which meant if a new house didn't come on the market based on the buyer appetite out there, every house on the market would be sold within 2 to 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. When that happens, that's an extreme seller's market. Sellers can ask for any price they want. They can tell you to piss off. They're not fixing the roof before you sell the house. Normal time on market or inventory for market is about a 3-month supply. Once we get to about a 4 to 6 month supply of properties based on the available buyers, then it becomes a buyer's market, right? And so we're starting to see that LA has gone from like half a month supply to 2.5 months of supply. Austin has gone from a 1 month supply to a 4.5 month supply. So we're starting to get to that area where buyers are going to have a little bit more power, but I don't think we're going to see, actually, I can virtually guarantee we're not going to see another 2008 type crash, because in 2009, the government effectively came in and took over the mortgage industry and said, no more of these flashy loans, no more of these interest only loans unless the client is highly qualified. So over the last 16 years, anybody who's bought a house has been properly vetted, real underwriting, real down payments, real job verifications. And so look, if my property value, I'm sitting here in Vegas and I have a house in LA, if they drop, by $50,000, I'm not going to walk away from it because I've got a couple $100,000 into each house. And it's like, we're not going to see like it was in 2008, where like, if you could buy a house on speculation with zero money down, and then properties went down 5 or 10% or 20%, why wouldn't you walk away from it? That's actually a pretty good business decision. But the business decision at the family level is not the same in 2025 as it was in 2008. So is the market going to soften? Yes. Are properties hopefully going to get a little bit cheaper for the buyers out there? Yes, 100%. Are people going to be walking away from their houses in droves, creating this huge foreclosure issue? I don't think there's a chance in hell that that's going to happen.
Now, I have a question here. It's kind of diverting from what you're talking about. We're in the same field. So you're talking business here, and I'm looking at you, Scott, and I know a little bit about your background. You have a business, you have a coaching business, you wrote books. You are aiming to be an intentional husband and father, right? So this is an intentional action you're taking. You do jiu-jitsu. My point here is that you do hard shit consistently, things that most people aren't going to do. So what is it about you that makes you want to go do things like jiu-jitsu and pay money to get your ass kicked? Why are you doing all this hard stuff?
Yeah, I mean, part of that is probably some like trauma from my childhood, right? And like, let's be clear, I was not emotionally abused, physically abused. Like I had a pretty good middle class upbringing, but there was always this fear. And we've talked a lot about this in Front Row Dads. Like, what is your lowercase t trauma, right? And my parents, even though we had a pretty good lifestyle, were always paycheck to paycheck. They didn't own a house until after I left for the army. There was this constant like, you can do better, you can do more. So in some ways, it's like a disease or a shortcoming of mine that I'm just like kind of addicted to productivity, right? So it's like I'm addicted to productivity, and I have shiny object syndrome where I like to try new stuff. I call it SOS syndrome, like invest in new businesses. There's always something cool going on. So part of it is just like a default of mine, right? Like it's something I'm proud of, but I'm a little worried about, right? It's like I can have a drink a night, but like if I have 20 drinks a night, that's a problem, right? And so same thing here. But I think doing hard stuff is just something lost in our society, right? Even the process of getting a mortgage, it is a linear process. This has to happen before this happens, before this happens. And I want to write a book called The Amazon Generation, where we've gotten so used to DoorDash and click a button and it's at my house within 24 hours. I think as like human beings, we need to do hard shit. And I heard a quote, and I wish I could figure out who to attribute it to, but it's like fruit is only perfect for a moment when it's on the vine. It's either growing or it's dying, right? Like if you don't pick that fruit in a couple day window, the fruit is only perfect for a very short period of time. And it's like you're either on this growth trajectory or you're on this dying trajectory, right? And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of men in my life, starting with, family members, where it's like men get to a certain age, which is where I'm at, 46, and they stop doing the hard stuff. And it's like things just fall apart in their family, in their business, and their life. So it's like, I've got a lot of fear around this of like, oh, am I going to end up like, dad or grandpa or whatever that were just kind of beaten down by the time they got in their 40s. And then the remaining 20, 30 years of their life were not particularly fulfilling. So for me, it's like, I'm always looking for hard shit to do, because I think that's just how we stay present and we stay like on this trajectory for growth. Like when people say they're bored, it blows my mind. It's like, dude, I don't have enough hours in the day to do all the cool stuff that I want to get good at. And sometimes my wife has to pull me aside and be like, do we really need another project right now? And I'm like, yeah, good point. Let's just focus on the 17 projects we have. And now it's bleeding off into her a little bit. She went and opened a school last year and she's like all in on growing her community. So it's a blessing and a curse. But I think it's just important, right? There's that book that a lot of people have read called The Comfort Trap. And I think it's real. Like some of the family members at the school that we opened were like, yeah, we're getting a little too comfortable. Let's do something. So we went for a 33-mile walk last year. We just started on one side of Vegas and we walked to Hoover Dam for no reason other than like, hey, let's spend a day doing hard stuff. And I just think that's important for the soul, man.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. As a matter of fact, you mentioned that. And I was thinking about this winter where I went camping and in the middle of the winter with a regular tent, not anything special. We didn't have the right equipment. I didn't even have I just had a sleeping bag and it was 15 degrees at night. I'm like, why the hell are we out here? And I think it's that thing there's something deep down in the guys that went where like, we need to get out of the comfort zone and just get a little reset going.
Yeah. And nobody has good stories from when we're comfortable. We actually, we went camping this weekend, with the school, and the camping trip was awesome till 3:30 in the morning and it has not rained in Vegas in 8 effing months. And all of a sudden, 3:30 in the morning, just howling winds, pouring rain, hail. From 3:30 to 5:30, I sat up in the middle of the tent like this, holding it up so it didn't collapse. And now my son's going to have a great story. Like, hey, remember that time we went camping and dad had to stay up all night holding the tent up? Like nobody has great stories when things go easy. Like, so I think, it's how we learn as humans is telling stories, and you got to have some hardships or some trials to tell good stories.
This podcast is going to go all over the place, but I want to go to jiu-jitsu really quick, if you don't mind. So speaking of hard stuff, what got you into it?
Well, I'm my first passion is boxing. And so I boxed for like 10 or 12 years, had like 5 amateur fights. And around 40, my wife was like, hey man, you're kind of already dumb enough. Do you think really getting punched in the head? Do you think getting punched in the head in your 40s and 50s? Do you think that's the appropriate workout? I'm like, oh, let me try this jiu-jitsu thing. And then a couple of things happen from jiu-jitsu. One, it's like, it's a new skill, right? So everybody, doesn't matter who you are, how athletically gifted you are, how smart you are, everybody starts at the bottom. There's no shortcut in jiu-jitsu. You have to have time on the mat to get better. So that was kind of cool, like starting a new adventure. And again, maybe that's a fault of mine. Maybe that's a superhero power. We'll figure out which one of those two go on my gravestone. So there was that. I want to start something new. It's been a great way to build community. So that's pretty cool. And then number 3, it's like, even when we're on this podcast, like I'm excited to be talking to Chris. I'm excited to be talking about Dimitri. Somewhere in the back of my mind, it's like, should I also be checking my email? Should I be seeing if anybody texts me? Should I be seeing if like there was an alert to lock our loans because rates went up? So there's always these distractions. When I get on the mat and I have somebody like Chris on top of me trying to choke me or break my wrist, you have no choice but to be 100% present. So it sounds kind of weird, but like I can't bring myself to get into meditation. Like I try to sit there for 5 minutes, my mind starts wandering. I can be at jiu-jitsu for 2.5 hours and not think about anything else, not think about problems with my kids, my wife, my business, my health, anything. It's just like you're there and you're present. So for me, that's kind of become the addiction, just like people get addiction to meditation or they're really big into prayer or whatever it is that allows them to focus. In my mind, jiu-jitsu is like, you have to be focused or you could get hurt. And so I think that's kind of why I have fallen in love with it.
I completely agree. It's a very weird sort of meditation because you hit the nail on the head. You can't think about anything else when you have somebody trying to kill you.
Yeah.
It's simulated murder and maiming. And so you are very aware and present of what's happening. And then the one thing I like about you, Scott, we don't have to go down the jiu-jitsu. I can go, but one thing I like about Scott is Dimitri, in jiu-jitsu, you have gi, right? Which is the normal little pajama looking thing, right? And there's something called no gi, which is like more like spandex type things. And I will say that Scott has the zestiest no gi clothes ever. I mean, it's so zesty.
I mean, if you're rolling around with grown men putting your balls in each other's face, you might as well wear some pink unicorn stuff, right? I mean, it's funny.
Yeah, we'll have to make that the thumbnail. All right. Well, Scott, in describing yourself, you've kind of described the man in the arena perfectly, which we love to get into on this podcast all the time. And I'll just read a part of this quote, and it's the man who at his worst, and we do want to talk about your triumphs as well, but at his worst, if he fails while daring greatly. And so maybe you can give us an example of when you dared greatly and failed.
Yeah. Staying in the mortgage business, right? It's like in 2008, everything's crashing down around us. Loans are hard to come by. Even if you can get a client, it's hard to close a deal. And I got out of the Army in 2000 making $18,000 a year, right? As like a private E4 or a specialist or whatever they call this. And all of a sudden I started working in a bank and I'm making like $100,000, right? Nobody in my family had ever made $100,000 in a year before. So I'm spending like a drunken sailor. I'm driving a Corvette. I'm like over leveraged on my property. And in 2008, when everything crashed, I can remember this like it was yesterday. My dad wanted to go get dinner. So we went to Subway and I'm like, okay, cool. I know I'm broke, but like dad will pick up the cost for dinner. And I wrote about this in the preface to my book. And we get there and we got 2 $5 footlongs and some chips and soda. So maybe $16 worth of food. And as we're going to check out, my dad's like, oh shit, man, you got to get this. I forgot my wallet at home because I had picked him up because I had a fancy Corvette. And at that moment, I did not have $16 in my checking account, nor did I have $16 of available space on any of my 5 credit cards to charge Subway to a credit card. And I just walked out of Subway in shame, crying in the car. And he comes out, he's like, what's going on? Right. He thought I was having a mental breakdown, which I probably was. And so $18,000 in 1999, last year in the Army, started making what I thought was amazing money. Little did I know you got to make a lot more than that to be financially secure. And then in 2008, I need to dig up that W-2 so I can share it. In 2008, I made $17,842 with like $10,000 a month overhead, right? So I was just charging things. And I mean, I don't think it would be ridiculous to say that, well, I know this for a fact, sitting in a room with loan officers, coaching them after we've kind of created the emotional safety and whatnot. Shout out to Front Row Dads for teaching us how to do that. I've gone around the room to people that have asked in 2008, and about 4 out of 5 were at some point sitting there with a gun, like ready to take their own life.
Whoa.
And I would be lying if I said I wasn't one of those, because it's like, you're 28 years old, you're looking at $1 million in debt, you're looking at a market that you have no clue if it's going to recover, and then on top of that, everybody in society is telling you as a loan officer or realtor, you're a piece of shit, you caused this problem. So it's like from Hillary Clinton with her famous liar loan speech, all the way down to family members of mine who were either financially distraught or losing their house. Like, Scott is the poster boy for the piece of shit that made this happen. And you're broke and you don't have a capacity to earn money. It's like, when I say suicidal, it's like, it's for real. I know a couple loan officers that did take their life back then. And in talking to other loan officers who I coach now, who can kind of look back at that time and laugh at it, because it was 15, 16 years ago, the amount of emotional and financial devastation that happened to people that were working in that space, it's overwhelming. And so, luckily I didn't do anything rash or stupid, and found a way from steal from Peter to pay Paul, and found a way to come back, and probably should have declared bankruptcy, but some of the money I owed were to people who I knew personally. So, I spent my entire 30s paying off $1 million in bad debt that I accumulated in my 20s. I didn't start to grow my net worth till I was like 41. So it's brutal, man. You want to talk about the man in the arena, like when you're broke and you feel like a piece of shit, and you got to get your ass to work to try to generate a loan that's probably not going to close because of market forces. That was a rough couple years.
So you have somebody who looks at the gun and unfortunately makes a decision. Then you have somebody else who says no, and they keep going and go through take the hard path, right? What was it in you that made you, and you might have already answered it, but like, how did you pull yourself out of that and not go the other route?
Yeah, it's weird. This is going to come across really, really strange. And I hope anybody that ever gets to a point in mental health seeks out professional help, which I did not, because I was a typical, 20-year-old man that's like, I'll figure it out myself. But like, when people talk about suicide, I'm just very open of like, I totally get it. Like, I really get why somebody in their life, or going through a divorce, or going through a medical problem, or going through a financial problem, I totally understand why somebody would take their own life. I don't condone it. I think it's wrong to do it, morally and humanistically, if that's even a word. I might have just made that up. I think it's wrong to do it, but I totally get why people do it. And in some ways, I just think this goes back to doing the hard stuff, right? I think I was lucky enough as a kid, whether it was Boy Scouts that was run like a military unit, because all of our leaders were in the sheriff's department and fire department and former military guys. So it's like, when I got to the Army, I'm like, oh, this is easy. This is just like Boy Scouts. So whether it was that, and then, wrestling in high school, and then the Army, and then boxing, it's like, I think I had done just enough hard stuff in my life where I was like, okay, cool. This is just another season of hardship, right? This is just another season of grind, and we'll figure it out. And I presume that the people that made the ultimate decision probably at somewhere in their life had not previously dealt with adversity or done the hard stuff. Or, I remember going to this training in the Army called Sapper School. It's like a condensed Ranger school for engineers. I just got lucky to go, even though I was an infantry guy. And I served prior to 9/11, so I never had to shoot anybody, thank God, or get shot at in anger. But just going to this school where it's like, you legitimately get 5 hours of sleep in a week while you're running mission after mission after mission. I'm like, dude, cold calling some realtors and finding some business can't be as hard as staying awake for a week straight. And I probably wasn't thinking that consciously, but subconsciously, I think I had done enough hard stuff where it's like, okay, let's stop the pity party. Let's get over it. It probably took me 6 months, and then like, let's just course correct and figure out how to make money.
It sounds like it comes back to do hard stuff, just like we talked about earlier. The doing hard stuff, no one ever picks it for themselves. They don't choose to go through the hard stuff typically, but they are so happy that they did once they're done with it. Interesting paradox.
Yeah.
All right. So let's switch gears back to marketing a little bit. So even in the real estate business, there's a lot of need for marketing. And now, if you're working with Chris at Red Palm and you're a local business, you're doing real well with Facebook ads and funnels and ads. And if you're working with me at Big Life Marketing, you're an online business, you're also doing well. But I mean, is that what you find too, or is there something that, going back to old school marketing, tell us about that?
Yeah, I think the market, and maybe you guys can speak more intelligently to this than I can. I think the market is really bifurcating in between, we'll just call it big box and like hyper relational, right? So just thinking about the realtor of the future, or the loan officer of the future, or the insurance agent of the future, I think either you will be big box, super low cost leader, everything's online, good luck talking to an AI bot, or it'll be super relational. And that might mean local, like you just service your local area, right? Or it might mean that it's a deeper relationship with the consumer. But what I talk about a lot is like, cool, is there a place for large funnels, Facebook that goes to a white paper, that goes to this, that goes to that? Sure. Absolutely. Right. And a lot of that stuff is great for brand awareness with people we've already worked with or people that we want to work with, so that when you pick up the phone, you can make the sale, right? So it's like nobody has ever in the loan space gotten a realtor to say, "Hey, Scott, I saw your Instagram reel. I saw your TikTok dance. Now I want to trust you with the biggest financial decision of my client's life." That has never happened in the history of the mortgage space, right? And I can't dance for shit on TikTok, so luckily this has not happened. But if you're doing we'll call it the meta marketing, pun intended, when I call that realtor and they've seen my Facebook stuff and they've seen my ads on Instagram and they've seen the content I'm putting out, and maybe they've read one of the white papers or they've landed on my landing page, you're just increasing the propensity that that person will take your call when it's time to build the relationship and ask for the deal. And the way that I describe this a lot is that a lot of people in a lot of industries, they hide behind social media, or they hide behind email marketing, or they hide behind things. Well, you're basically the nerd in every 80s movie who doesn't get the girl because you never lean in for the kiss. And so one of the things that I'm talking to a lot with our coaching clients is like, yes, and right, do all this stuff, put up the social media content, do the weekly newsletter, do all that stuff. And at some point, you got to lean in for the business kiss and actually ask for the business, right? At some point, you guys had to ask me to be on this podcast. I knew that it existed. I like Chris a lot. We've had deeper conversations than most humans I've only met once because we are in Front Row Dads together. But at some point, you got to do the outreach and be like, hey, man, no, we actually want you to be a guest on the podcast, right? And so same thing, I think, in a lot of businesses, because things have become so automated and because social media marketing is powerful and because brand awareness is powerful, a lot of businesses are hiding behind that. And then they either haven't identified the person that can build the relationship, or they haven't identified the system or process to actually pick up the phone, make the call, and make the sale. Because in all businesses, nothing happens until somebody checks out or they sign on the line, which is dotted. Until then, it's all just kind of, optimistic logistics. And so that's what I would say old school. It's like, if you run a service-based business, and like, look, if you're selling widgets on Instagram, I bought a $20 package of connectors to tie to my backpack to secure my water bottle. I don't need to have a relationship with that guy. But if somebody's going to be my financial advisor, I might learn about them online, but eventually we have to have a conversation and be in relation for me to be like, oh yeah, cool, I'm going to transfer this $100,000 to you to manage this, IRA that I have. And I think that's missing right now in a lot of businesses, because there's a bunch of 22-year-old life coaches on Instagram telling them just, buy my $99 funnel and leads will rain from the sky. It's like, bro, you're 22. Maybe you have some very cool life experience and some very cool technical experience in this little pocket of online marketing, but you don't know anything about my business. You don't know how I generate leads or close deals. So yeah, that's my rant on that. Like, pick up the fucking phone. Excuse my language.
Well, I like that. And it's the business advice for 2025 by Scott Groves is go for the kiss.
Yeah. You got to lean in for the business kiss. It doesn't happen, man.